The Final Fantasy Podcast is brought to you by Potions. If you're down 20 HP and you need that 20 HP back, use a potion. It's very cheap and gives you a little bit of HP back. Hey, good evening. This is BlueHighwind, and this is the Final Fantasy Wiki Podcast. We now have a sponsor by Potion Brand Potions.
Hey.
This is a podcast about wiki stuff and also the Final Fantasy series, but mostly the Final Fantasy series because wiki stuff is wiki stuff. I don't know. Joining me is
they're intertwined.
Yeah, they are intertwined. Eventually, it all ends up being part of the vast compendium of knowledge and various nonsense that is the Final Fantasy Wiki, the greatest Final Fantasy repertoire of knowledge on the internet. Currently, at the time we're speaking, assuming the internet survives and society does not collapse. So, joining me tonight is Catuse. Hi.
Hello.
Yes. Also, with Catuse is SomeColorMage. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, hello. And with those two people is Technobliterator. Hi, Technobliterator.
Sup, dudes?
Hi.
Aston Villa were top of the league. No, we weren't. We were top 10 for not very long, and then we got kicked down again. We suck.
Oh. Sports ball talk, really, on a Final Fantasy Wiki podcast?
I know, right?
I know.
I thought that's what this was. This was the Final Fantasy football.
No,
Dude,
the Fantasy Football Podcast. The Fantasy Football Wiki. That's what the
The
FF
Fantasy
stands for.
Final Football.
Yeah, that's what the FF stands for. Speaking of football, Aaron Judge hit a home run in his first at bat.
Woo! Good
Yeah.
for him. I don't know who that is. I don't know who he plays for either.
He plays for the New York Yankees.
Oh,
Play
okay.
baseball.
That's not a football team.
No, but there was a football team called the Yankees once upon a time. Anyway, we have a lot of news. There was a lot of news this month. Because it's March. I don't know why. You know why? Because Final Fantasy XVI had a giant media tour. And that just unleashed the floodgates of news upon news upon news upon news upon news. So I wanted to bullshit and talk about Marvel's Midnight Suns for like 10 minutes. But I don't have time for that. Instead, I got to talk about... we have some big news in terms of the structure of Square Enix. Have you heard of this company, Square Enix?
No, I mean, I've never played any of their games before. I wonder what they're like.
Oh, but how do you know they're a game company?
Good
That's
question.
the company that keeps trying to sell NFTs and nobody buys, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We have the 25th
funnily enough, it's
anniversary
actually
of
very
Final Fantasy
relevant.
VII. They're selling NFTs for that.
Yeah, which funnily enough is actually relevant because the president of Square Enix, who has gone fired, that's the news story. One of the speculations was, he got fired because he was pushing the NFT shit and no one was buying it. But we did a little bit of investigation and the new president is not without his history in the space of cryptocurrency.
That's kind of a tenuous link, because like people are looking at the company that he worked for before Square Enix, and they're basically just one of those we get into everything kind of things. Like they didn't get into NFTs until after the new guy left that company, because he's been at Square for I think about 3-4 years now, and NFTs didn't actually exist until 3 years ago.
Okay, let me specify this story. So, Square Enix president Yosuke Matsuda, who has been president for roughly 10 years now, I think, something like 7 or 8. He is no longer president,
thereabouts.
and he has been replaced by Takashi Kiryu.
Well, he's stepping down in 1 or 2 months.
Okay.
He is still currently president, but the board have announced their intention that at the next big board meeting, he's going to leave the company and Takashi Kiryu becomes CEO.
Yes, this was announced on March 3rd, and the board will come together in June 2023. So he's currently the lame duck president, and we have a new president-elect of Square Enix, who is this gentleman that has been around for about 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, there is multiple speculation as to why the former president was fired, including the failure of Marvel's Avengers, NFT stuff, the fact that Forspoken sold like shit, but no one actually really knows.
Yeah, like, it does actually look like it's an amicable split, because we do have to talk about more Final Fantasy XIV stuff later, because there was a live later on about 12 hours before we recorded this podcast, and both Matsuda and Kiyu were actually on it at the beginning, and like Matsuda just seems to be like fine, like he's not, you know, simpering with rage at the board or anything. So it seems that like it's an amicable departure.
Well, there is a cultural thing in Japan where you're usually not going to speak shit about the place you work. Typically. Especially if you're a guy that's high enough up to be a CEO. But, you know, maybe that culture is starting to shift. That's just been traditional. There's a reason for change they list here, which is under the rapid change of business environments surrounding the entertainment business, blah, 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 blah. It's a bunch of bullshit. They don't say anything in this press release.
Yeah.
So, that's the end of that.
I think, yeah, we don't really know what any of this shit means, except for, like, you know, maybe this guy is if not an NFT guy, then somewhat more restrained and won't have every year, Happy New Year, here's some bullshit about Web3 shit that never works and never will.
Yeah. Oh, he has been around for exactly 10 years, because he took over in April 2013, taking over from Yoshi Wada, everyone's favorite Yoshi Wada. Yeah. You know what? Let us look back at the last 10 years of Square Enix. I think Yosuke Matsuda did an okay job. They released good video games in that period.
Yeah, like, the company is doing fine for most of that time. It's just started to hit a wall in the last few years, and not even in the game department. The console games department seems to have been the best it's been for a long time.
Yeah.
It's mostly just Square Enix's side stuff catching up to them yet again, because that's what always happens with Square Enix. They get a ton of money, and then they accidentally blow it on something really fucking stupid.
I mean, the failure of Eidos and all that stuff, that was more Yoshi Wada's doing. I mean, that purchase, I guess, ultimately didn't make sense for the company, but it wasn't...
It was never really a good purchase, no.
Those two cultures did not match. I mean, if Matsuda might have been the guy that went up to Crystal Dynamics and said, please add all this stupid games as a service shit to Avengers and kind of ruin that game. But we're not going to ever know. That's not something that anyone's ever going to report. So, you know, mildly concerned about the future, because anytime a company changes direction like this, who knows what's going to happen, and I'm generally happy with where Square Enix is right this second.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I can agree with that. Like, you know, Square Enix, they've had their hits and misses. Mm-hmm. They're overall doing much better lately than they have been in the recent history. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But it would be more impactful if someone like Yoshi-P or like, you know, someone like that left, than it would be like, you know, someone super, super high up who's only involved in the business shit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have executive meddling all over the place in the video game industry, but somehow, you know, the fans are going to, if something goes wrong, the fans are probably going to blame the people on the ground, someone like Yoshi-P or Nomura, not the suits.
Mm-hmm. the other news, for maybe an indication of Square Enix's future direction, is that Symbiogenesis game is still happening, whatever that thing is.
And it looks like shit.
Well, it sounds amazing, because the music that's in the trailer I had stuck in my head for like a day. But it did go around a while on Twitter with just like pictures of the overall economy of what this thing is supposed to be, with blockchain and just the scuzziest, awful shit.
And like, not even that, just the fucking art, because I mean, does anyone know what NFT art is usually like?
I mean, it looks like it honestly looks like it was made by AI. These characters,
yeah, that's
supposed to be like hundreds of them.
NFT art, you basically just create a few assets and then get a computer to just put together all the possible permutations of them, and the end result looks ugly as hell.
Yeah. So, please, no one buy Symbiogenesis or anything involved with it for the good of video games.
So I have a question, actually. So the marketing is that there are 10,000 characters available, and presumably these are non-fungible, right?
I have no idea.
Does this mean that there could be only 10,000 people playing Symbiogenesis at any one time, or how the fuck does this thing work?
There's something like in their role plan of like being able to duplicate NFTs, so yeah, funging the non-fungible tokens. Also, yes, I found the one picture I wanted to.
Oh man, that was a great hat.
Yeah, they clearly only exist on one side of everyone's head, since the hair just clips through in every direction.
This makes Final Fantasy XIV's like hat clipping issues look like nothing. Oh my god, how is this like official like an actual like poster that they put out?
It's the same
NFT
face.
art, man.
It's the exact same face. They pasted it 4 times.
What is this?
I don't know.
Okay, so good news. Clearly, Square Enix spent like $5 on this, and we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, you know, I only bring it up because the trailer music is really, really good. I am annoyed by how much I like the trailer music. Also,
Square
that there
Enix knows their music.
Yeah, there also is that Final Fantasy VII NFT story that I mentioned, and I think we can move on from... Well, one more thing about NFTs is that Hajime Tabata, Final Fantasy XV's director and Type Zero's director...
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, he's also speaking out that NFTs and, like, blockchain shit is the future of video games. That there's going to be a Japan Metaverse Economic Zone, is the quote. That's apparently what he's been working on since he quit. I don't know what that means. Some kind of NFT co-prosperity sphere. I don't know.
Nobody knows what any of this shit means.
Yeah, it may be mistranslated or something. Genuinely, I would study more, but I am intellectually lazy when it comes to NFTs, in that I just think it's all a load of bullshit, and all this shit can get burned down.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, in bigger news, Final Fantasy XI, the other Final Fantasy XIV, the older one, its director is shutting down, or he's passing the reins on. So Akihito Matsui, he is going to be dropping down. He's been running the game since April 1st, 2012, and is going to be passing over the reins to Yoji Fujito.
Woo!
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the future of Final Fantasy XI is unclear right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
yeah,
I'm
like,
shocked.
They're saying that, you know, they'll just be working on a smaller scale for now. And Final Fantasy XI is far from dead. Like, the game just had like a revival. Like the first storyline post like the original ending, the Voracious Resurgence ended either last month or the month before. So like there's still stuff going on there. It's just it's just that part of the reality is that the game is old. It's like the only thing still in existence that uses PlayStation 2 dev kits.
Wow, that's
like it.
That game,
like,
I'm surprised, has not had a full like tech rebuild just to keep it going.
Yeah, because Yoshi-P is because he's head of Creative Business Unit 3. He's also the director of the producer of 11 at the moment,
really?
and like 11 doesn't even have an engineering budget anymore. Yoshida's talked about this before. He budgets all of 11 and 14's engineering as Final Fantasy 14's engineering, so that like when there's an emergency in one of the games or there's nothing to do in one of the games, he can just assign everyone on that team to the other game.
Huh. Yeah, that's not good if you're the older, less popular brother to be on the same team in the same pool of money.
Like, it just in general seems like, aside from the monthly update they do, it just seems to be a very low maintenance game in general. So
yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it's ever waned in popularity. It's just genuinely just being slowly sunsetted, I guess, is their plan.
I guess.
I mean, how are the other really, really old MMOs that are still going? Like, is Ultima Online still a thing? Are people still playing that one?
I don't know about Ultima Online, but EverQuest definitely is. EverQuest still gets yearly expansion packs.
Yeah, EverQuest is...
That's crazy.
Let me see. I'm going to check Ultima Online if it's had a new expansion. It is not.
I know.
2015 was the last
RuneScape
one.
is still alive and kicking.
Yeah. Yeah, those games... I think EverQuest will last forever. It'll outlast World of Warcraft. I'm going to put a bet down on that one.
I would agree with that bet. I mean,
Yeah.
I think World of Warcraft only has so much life left in it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that's purely because of Blizzard's mismanagement of that game, and then mismanagement period.
Well,
Yeah,
also,
like-
I mean,
Dragonflight has done better than the previous two World of Warcraft expansions, but it's still basically delaying the inevitable, really.
Okay. Big news. Not terribly big news for us, though, is the 3DS and Wii U eShops shut down on the 28th. So
Right.
everything that was online only on those servers is basically lost forever, except for the small group of people trying to make a kind of like preservation thing. So I'm trying to think, what was that one game? Yasumi. Damn it, I'm blanking on it. Anyway, well, what we lost, I'll figure out what I want to talk about, the one thing that's missing there. What we've lost is Final Fantasy 1 through 3 on the Virtual Console of 3DS. That's lost forever, but those are just ports. Final Fantasy 1 through 6 on Virtual Console, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, Mystic Quest. All this stuff was only released in Japan anyway, but it is not there. Pictologica Final Fantasy with an unpronounceable character at the end, which was a 3DS version that's already got shut down a few years ago. And I don't know if this multiplayer server was even still running, but Final Fantasy Explorers, I'm pretty sure that system would be completely dead at this point. Remember Final Fantasy Explorers?
And that game was pretty much dead on launch, so...
Yeah,
I remember like not even playing it, but people talking about it for about 3 seconds. Then I think everyone just forgot that it existed.
Yeah, it was like that one Zelda multiplayer game that came out on the 3DS that also nobody liked, except it was even less popular. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a crappy thing that just happened, that a huge like section of video game history can just get wiped out with no legal way of really continuing it. I'm going to look up what this game is. The one game I wanted to talk about, because I cannot remember what it was called. Damn it. Should I go and deal with this dead air? No. Crimson Shroud. The Yasumi Matsuno game that came out on the 3DS eShop. Did any of you play that?
No.
Yeah, it was like a digital tabletop role-playing game. The people that did play it seemed to really like it. It's like extremely like a guild game, or like it was part of the guild like 01 collection. It was a thing that Level 5 did for the 3DS. Anyway, that's Lost Forever.
The art kind of looks like something from Evil, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, I had like barely heard of any of these games, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have any curiosity about it, well, put that curiosity away, because Nintendo has killed your opportunity to play it. Unless you do one of the many options you have to get around that.
I'm sure it can be done.
I'm pretty sure you could break into your 3DS and find the online files and all that stuff. Is now, I recommend it, because there's no legal recourse. So go for it. Have fun. Right. Forspoken. The game I need to finish, and probably never will. DLC is coming out May 26th. It's called Entanto We Trust. It's going to take place 25 years in the future. Isn't it? I think it's probably the only one, yeah. Going to take place 25 years in the future.
Yeah, because they already shut down the whole studio.
Yeah, Luminous is getting shuttered. So, well, technically 2 games. They also did Final Fantasy 15.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you count that, yeah. So they sectioned Square Enix off into its own, well, a part of whatever business unit it was.
Yeah,
they sectioned it off.
Vision 5, I think.
That's the one. They sectioned it off into its own studio because they didn't trust them, and then they let its own studio make its own game, and they didn't like it, so they put it back in Square Enix. What the fuck was the point? Like, what are they doing?
They wanted Luminous to be the Luminous engine to be a big thing, but like ultimately it just fell into the same kind of debacles that Crystal Tools did, and that just nobody other than Square wanted to invest in it. So like, there's no point having a studio just dedicated to this engine.
Well, I think the idea was that they were going to go and create a kind of external-ish studio to make different sorts of games. So that way you end up with something like Forspoken that, in theory, would have the scale of Final Fantasy, but also be able to do something a Final Fantasy never could do, which is star a black protagonist from, New York City. But that game does not hit that scale at all. Though I should finish it. I did pay $75 for that fucking thing.
It just didn't. It's just Forspoken just didn't resonate with people. Like that's what happened there. Like they were never able to really market it and fully explain what it is and why people should be invested in it. And as a result, once it came out and it only got like 7 out of 10s with the review score, that kind of kills any new IP, right? If you're coming out with a game that's like 7 out of 10 these days is like the kiss of death. Even though that says, oh, it's an above average game. No, I mean, people aren't going to spend the money on that.
Yeah, only some kind of idiot would spend $75 on a video game that is only kind of okay, considering how fierce the competition is. Like, I mean, it is... That's one thing that I kind of get worried about, like, the overall future of the industry, and I figure eventually it should fix itself, but, like, it's got to be so hard right now to release a video game, especially one that you have to release at this point. You've done all you can to get that game as good as you can. It was delayed an entire year. They had to know that that game was going out and wasn't going to be, the success it needed to be.
Yeah.
I feel bad for everyone in Luminous.
Same.
Well, better news.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. It's coming to Steam on April 6th. I guess that's all there is to say about that.
Yeah. Like,
Okay.
I mean, maybe the game runs better on PC now. I don't know.
I bet it'll run terribly on PC, actually.
Whoa, yeah.
I mean, the PC version has run terribly. It's has been up until now Epic Game Store exclusive,
Oh.
and that was known for running so badly that people modded the game to remove everyone's hair to get the game to run better.
Yeah. That was the story last year where somebody counted that, like, the king has so many polygons in his robes that when he shows up on screen...
I mean, that's understandable. Have you seen that king? He is a very wide lad.
I know. He's enormous and very fancy. There's a lot of him to deck, all right? He is deeply bedeckled, and he has a lot of square footage. So I understand why he would crash the game's frame rate.
Yoon and Scaife tried the game, and one of the first things Yoon messaged me about is that she's scared of the king.
I still find that game so amazing because it did like the Sonic 2006 fucking thing where it would like have a load screen for an NPC to say one line.
Yeah, that was that. The like trying to talk to people in the town is just so fucking weird.
It's so strange. Clearly, they intended for this town to be a town, and instead, it's just a menu. Oh man, I love that game. I love that people legitimately love it, and like, I don't have to say it's so bad it's good, but it is fascinating.
I still need to play through the DLC. I did start on the Bahamut stuff, but like even with making the game easier, the Bahamut DLC is a big grind.
Yeah. All right. I think everyone's gonna respond to this one. This came out yesterday at 6:30 p.m. Well, that's when I found out about it. There was also really enormous news that happened around the same time, but we can't talk about that. That's outside our scope. But just as gigantic, E3's dead.
Rip Bozo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's clearly just as gigantic as the other piece of news.
Yes, it is as important, as significant. People were cheering in the streets for the same reason. Well, I guess the opposite. People were cheering and weeping at the same time. It was a lot of very difficult emotions. Oh, I've seen this. All right, so Catuse SomeColorMage, sorry, posted the tweet of a former ex-president typing on his computer. They canceled E3, but I never got to go. Oh no, my day could not get any worse. And well, there you go.
Anyway, the writing on the wall was through for E3 basically this entire month. Companies just started announcing, no, we're not going to be here. And like eventually the question became, is anyone there? Like nobody was confirming a presence as E3 at all. So yeah, there's just nothing there. And E3 tends to be pretty bad anyway. And for those of you who like anti-vaping PSAs, the Summer Games Fest is still happening.
The Summer Games Fest at least had like a Weezer shit post once. I don't think I've had fun with E3 for the past several years.
It peaked with that one Konami show.
All right, well, there hasn't been an E3 for the last few years. Like the last one was
Okay,
2019.
I haven't had fun with E3 for several years prior to the great cataclysm of 2019-2020.
Well, like, I used to be super excited for E3 every time it would roll around. You'd always see that would always be when developers would come out with whatever new thing they're working on, and I'd always say, "Oh shit, it's gonna be Jack 4 this year," or it's gonna be, because I'm a Jack and Daxter fan, or "Oh shit, it's gonna be Ratchet and Clank," and then sometimes it actually was Ratchet and Clank, or it's gonna be Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then it actually fucking happened. Like, so those are all the memories I have from E3. Like, that you'd always build up anticipation for this huge thing, and you'd always tune into the different shows that they would have, and it was always like a dream to actually go there, right? For sports fans, it was like the Super Bowl almost. It was a thing that would happen every year that people would anticipate their whole lives actually getting to see it in person, because it was this huge fucking event, right? But, now they've just kind of like not done it anymore. And you can kind of understand why, because the studios really want the flexibility of, we'll just announce things on our own time. And,
yeah, and that's one thing. And that's one thing that has basically allowed Jeff Keighley to outmaneuver the ESA. And also ReedPop was involved in E3 this year for some reason. And it basically allowed the Summer Game Fest to replace E3. Summer Games Fest goes on for like a month.
Yeah, it is a long series of streams.
Sure, there are gaps between them, but they're not crammed into like the 3-day period that E3 allotted for the live streams.
Yeah, I guess I'm the only one that actually went to E3, right? I say with a gigantic shit-eating grin on my face.
From this lot of us, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, lucky me.
I wouldn't be surprised if in 10, 15 years' time or so, they bring it back as some kind of like nostalgia thing. Because I fully expect that it's one of those things, it's going to be like Blockbuster, where it's going to be like the nostalgia thing that everyone remembers, and then they're going to make a huge amount of money off of it.
The ESA is definitely constantly going to try and bring it back because it is one of their main sources of funding.
Yep.
Well, they're going to have to figure out how to make do, because this new press release was not even like, we'll see you next year, which is what they've normally done. Like, they didn't have one in 2022, but they're like, all right, well, we're taking the year off, but we'll be back next year and better than ever. Wait for us, gamers. And this time they're like, oh, sorry, dudes. It's just not happening this time. And
it's not a good sign.
Yeah, they didn't even turn into the Sonic the Hedgehog voice. So.
Yep. It's a sad day, but like I said, I fully expect they're gonna bring it back at some point, because people are gonna start to miss it. And honestly, the replacement for it, the game show, is a piece of shit. They have not yet figured out how to make a good... Sorry, game show. The Game Awards. They have not yet figured out how to make a good Game Awards. Then again, all award shows suck, if you ask me.
Well, the problem with the Game Awards is sort of like an exemplification of what I already didn't like about E3, and then it's just kind of true with a lot of these shows, which is that it's just sort of like so corporate as to just be fucking...
Right, yeah.
It's completely inauthentic, right? And unlike, like the Oscars or some shit, there's no fun celebrity drama that everyone can tune in for, because that's the only reason anyone ever tunes in for that piece of shit. There's nothing like that people can, there's no who's gonna wear this on the red carpet, or look at, Ben Affleck looking bored as fuck next to J-Lo who's trying to make him super excited. There's none of that going on. So, when you don't have that, and you're left with just the lack of authenticity, that comes from this kind of corporate event, then it just becomes like so pointless. And as much as they can keep saying like, oh, we got more viewers than the Grammys this year and the Grammys and MTV and whatever combined, it's like, okay, but how many people liked it? And how many people are gonna remember like, oh, that was a really good Game Awards? No, they're just gonna remember like, oh, that game won Game of the Year and you just didn't deserve to win it. Fuck that game. Oh, The Last of Us swept all the awards. That's all. Anyway, the total tangent. I'll stop the tangent.
We got way off on a tangent.
I mean, I feel like this explains why people were hyper fixated on the like Bill Clinton rabbi guy. But also, I think what I'm convinced is that next time Jeff Keighley needs to get Kojima, and he needs to walk up to fucking Konami and be like, "Get your fucking game out of my mouth," and just like pour a bunch of gasoline on stage on like a copy of Metal Gear Survive and just let it rip.
So this is the ECW wrestling version of the Game Awards. We're gonna settle this at the Summer Game Fest. Meet me at the ring, brother.
To be fair, I can think of several developers that would totally just try and grab a steel chair and whack some other developer they hate. So
yeah.
So, I was trying to go for the Will Smith and Chris Rock, but I like the WWF.
Do not give David Cage a steel chair. He's gonna cause so many problems with it.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, so to go back to E3, personally, all right, having actually been there, which was awesome, and I'm going to use that as a point of cred for my gamer cred for the rest of my life. It's like, I was actually there.
Hey.
You don't understand, man. You weren't there, man. What was great about it was, because I actually got to go, like, before it had rotted away to dust like it had those last few years before it was canceled. If you remember E3 2019, like, every reporter I was hearing reporting about that event, they were like, man, I don't know why this show is even still happening. There's so much empty space. So when I got to go, that was 10 years ago, it was actually still mostly the E3 of Legend. So, you know, you could actually play a game and just pick it up. And one of the great things was, like, I was playing Sonic Boom, if you remember that game. That was like the first game I picked up at that thing, and I'm playing it, and I'm aghast in horror at how fucking bad this game is. And the Sega rep comes up to me, and he's like, I'm trying to say it as diplomatically as possible. It's like, what were you going for here? I don't understand. What was I'm like, what Sonic game were you inspired by, and was it Sonic 2006? And, you know, you kind of lose moments like that when it's just a live stream of let's do, like, 9 trailers back to back to back. It just, it makes the gaming industry feel, I don't know, more generic and kind of depressing, which maybe it's become.
Yeah, it's inauthentic is what it is, because they hyper control everything so that you see it a certain way, and it's just not, like, organic, or they've lost the human element to it.
Yeah, I don't know. But I understand why it could not happen. I mean, you know, there's something we lost in the showmanship. Even the failed showmanship of that Konami stream from 2009. It's just, like,
basically, my theory is that there were so many, like, over the years with the publishers coming in, enough of them have racked up enough embarrassing moments at E3 that they were like, oh shit, let's never let that happen again. And let's, hyper control our show, right? But in doing that, like, the embarrassing moments were kind of what endeared us to the publishers and the people involved to begin with. Like, you know, that was the stuff we liked about it. Like,
well, that is what effectively killed E3. Like, 1 year after one of the E3s when Nintendo embarrassed themselves, they just announced, fuck it, we don't need to do our conference from within E3 anymore. We'll do it live. They invented Nintendo Direct. It worked. It showed everyone else they could do this.
Yep.
Yeah,
it
you could
sucks,
just
man.
spit up a stream. And the other thing, like, that's very important is, like, even by the time I'd gotten there, the writing was kind of on the wall because what E3 was, it wasn't supposed to be this consumer-facing event. It had kind of become that because gaming sites had used it as this big moment of let's go and have this big bash and we're going to get, like, half our revenue of the year in this one moment. But, like, that was supposed to be a we're selling games to retail moment. That's what the whole thing was. That's what the showmanship was. We're going to show off how powerful, how rich we are. Walmart, you have to go and buy 50 copies of Far Cry 1, put it in your best spot, and we're going to all make tons of money together. And, you know, by that point, the gaming industry had already become mostly digital. So it all was kind of, you know, past its prime. It was all extinct. We were walking through a corpse already, and it was still a fun time, but, you know. That kind of event just doesn't make any sense because no one goes to stores now, and there's no games media.
I'm surprised GameSpot is still. No, sorry, GameStop is
Either
still
one.
running at this point. Like, yeah, well, GameSpot isn't running anymore. It's now owned by Fandom. It's not its own thing. But GameStop, yeah, I'm shocked that's still running.
The GameStop in Providence, Rhode Island, Providence Place Mall, it's always full of people. I don't understand. I mean, sometimes I go in there just to people watch, but it's like, who are all you people? And they sell Among Us for $25.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's people who just really love the nostalgia of it, but I don't know. I'm not sure because I always buy games on digital because, you know, if I'm going to go back and forth between countries all the time, I don't want to carry a bunch of boxes with me. So I always buy them on digital just because of that.
Yeah, I'm definitely surprised that the Electronics Boutique, which is some of the international branches of GameStop, like down here in Australia and New Zealand, are still around because like it does really feel like I'm very much talking about Australian business stuff now, but it feels like Electronics Boutique should have been completely destroyed by JB Hi-Fi, which is a general home theater and electronics company that has roughly as big a game library as EB hasn't completely taken them over yet.
Yeah,
Kind of like Best Buy for us, I guess. Blue and Cat.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, GameStop actually posted a profit recently, which is their first in about 2 years. So,
Yeah.
I like buying things from a store because I like the fact that there's a guy who has to hand me a thing. I hate buying things digital, which I have to do on Steam. I would rather have a box, even if the box is purely symbolic and meaningless.
No, I understand that for sure, and people like
Right.
to own something as opposed to have it exist in the cloud where, you know, the company might go down in the case of Google Stadia, and then you've lost it forever, and oh, well, they refunded it you, but you still don't, you know, you don't own the thing that you bought. So no, I understand people who say that, but yeah, and I also understand the preference for buying things in person as opposed to online, because despite the fact I work for a retail company in which I'm mostly doing the e-commerce stuff, I personally hate to buy groceries online.
No, I'm
You
not
know,
doing
so I
that.
can-
No, never.
Yeah, I can completely understand people who prefer to buy games in person as well. Like, I totally get it.
Yeah, so I'll be buying Final Fantasy XVI with a physical copy. I may even buy it from the GameStop
Oh, yeah,
that's
like-
by my house.
Like I've got a physical copy on pre-order, and because shipping games in Australia always tends to be a clusterfuck that never arrives on time. I've actually got to go to the store, pick it up in person. But yeah,
So let's move on to our next and maybe final topic. Well, we have a gigantic topic after that, but Kazushige Nojima, he's written a book. And that book is called Traces of Two Pasts, Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think this was part of an Ultimania from a few years ago, but it's only just been translated into English this month.
No, this one wasn't part of the Ultimania. So he actually wrote 2 Final Fantasy VII Remake novels, both about Aerith, funnily enough. One of them was part of the Ultimania, and that was about Aerith and her upbringing in the Shinra building. The other one, this one is in two parts, where the first part is about Tifa's history in Nibelheim up until when she moved to it turns out she moved to the Sector 8 slums before she moved to the Sector 7 slums. And then the part about Aerith is focused on her upbringing in the Sector 5 slums.
Okay. It is 400 pages, says Amazon, which I don't recommend you buy it from, but does look like it's very small font, though. Not small font, I mean it looks like big font. So it's probably on the borderline between novella and novel, which is a complicated thing.
Yeah, no, it's a novel size.
Okay.
I have it. It's the size of any other novel I have. Whereas the one about Aerith that was released with the Ultimania, that was novella size.
Okay.
Yeah, so the book has a bunch of lore details, which we did talk about when the book was released in Japanese. We talked about it a little bit when it came out then, and some translators, a little bit. I
don't think we did.
Some translators.
I don't remember it all.
Okay, well, some translators gave us a few details of the book, but now I have it. It turns out there's a bunch of stuff they just haven't translated. They just didn't translate to us, or that they just didn't highlight because they didn't think it was important. But I found it super important. So we learned so much about Nibelheim from this book, and the thing I'm most happy about, and the thing I was most excited about with anything, like this is back before we even knew 7 Remake was ever going to happen. The one thing I was most excited to learn about was Zangan, right? That was always the character I was most excited to learn anything about, because I'm a huge sucker for the monk characters, right? And no, they didn't disappoint with this. They gave a pretty good a bunch of info about Zangan and how he trained Tifa, how he discovered Tifa, and what Zangan's all about. There's also an implication that Zangan might actually work for Avalanche, which would make a lot of sense. Yeah. And then you learn about the time where Tifa moved to the Sector 8 slums. You learn basically the full history of what happened straight after the Nibelheim incident, because they skip over that part. So there's the part in Before Crisis, which is the day before Cloud, Zack, and Sephiroth arrived in Nibelheim. And that was the day when the Turk had just been sent over and recruited Tifa to go lead the investigation team, to tour guide them. They basically they include that part, and then they skip over the Nibelheim incident, because Tifa just says, "Oh, it happened as Cloud described," and then refuses to elaborate further, right? Which is her basically saying like, yeah, she's not gonna like contradict what Cloud's saying. So that we just get a ton of details from this book, like a ton of stuff that we didn't really know much about, and I will not elaborate further because I have not read that much further.
Okay. All right. Well, if anything dirty happens, you have to tell me.
According to the translators, there is something, but that will be later.
Okay.
Haven't gotten to that bit yet.
All right. I don't know why my mind has to go there, but inevitably it does. I don't think I could ever read a novelization of something I've either seen or played. Somehow I just can't ever bring myself to accept the written word version of a character I've seen in a TV show. Like I can't read any Star Wars novels. I've never been able to really do it. It always just felt kind of weird and off, and it's like now I can suddenly see inside Tifa's internal monologue. It doesn't feel right. I don't know why.
No, I do feel that, because one of the things that I really love about the Final Fantasy VII characters, and Tifa especially, one of the things I really love about her is you can read her lines of dialogue 5-10 different ways as to what she could mean with anything she says, right? There's 5-10 different ways you could read anything, and in the book it just tells you like, no, this is what she was thinking. And you do kind of lose that aspect. So I was quite worried about reading the book when I read it, but it has so far far surpassed my expectations in that regard. I think it's a very good read. There's a lot of new lore details we've learned there that I really loved. I loved how he portrayed all of the characters so far. And as someone who's written about these characters extensively for the wiki pages, they're very true to them. So yeah, I'm gonna say I will say this is a good. I can easily recommend this book if you are a big Final Fantasy VII fan. I can't tell you how good of a novel it is because I'm not much of a reader, but at least from the aspect of being a Final Fantasy VII remake fan, is a good book.
Okay. Let's say it's probably as good as a Thomas Pynchon novel. How about that?
I don't know, but maybe. Sounds right.
All right. I think that's all our news. I think we can finally move on to our main subject.
I mean, aside from the main topic news, one more smaller news topic.
Oh, I missed this.
Final Fantasy XIV live letter about 13 hours ago from when we recorded. Patch 6.4, the Dark Throne is coming probably May-ish. This is towards the end of the expansion now, so the story is starting to gear up towards getting us to where 7.0, which is going to be revealed on July 28th, release sometime after January 2024 goes. We're gonna hop into the void and beat the shit out of Golbez.
Yeah. Take that, Golbez.
Also, because of there's a July Fan Fest, I actually showed you this picture before of some of the merchandise. It's like the axolotl plushie.
Oh yeah. That's awesome. I want that.
All that merch stuff is coming out. There's so it's the start of the big previously 2-year, but I guess now every 2.5 year press cycle around the 14 expansions.
Yeah, I have a very long flight that I'm putting together right now, and I may need an Eloxel to keep my neck straight.
And it's I believe it's available for pre-order on the Square Enix store right now.
But it also said it was like $40, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It is somewhat expensive.
So, Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16! Final Fantasy 16. Yoshi-P this month had a gigantic press tour, which culminated in an hour-long PAX East presentation, showing off all kinds of things about the game, everything you could possibly want asked, and more. He mentioned many, many times that you can pet the dog, and there is a dog, and there appears to be a dog plush.
Entire hour petting a plushie at Torgal just to prove that yes, you can pet him.
Yeah, but then when he was playing the game, he goes up to Torgal, who is Clive's dog, and he unleashes a heavy attack, and the dog jumps out of the way. It was the best moment. Ugh.
And there's... Which, as Koji Fox helpfully pointed out, yes, you can pet the Torgal. No, you cannot kill the Torgal.
I'm assuming Torgal is immortal, just like Sora's dog, Goofy. Goofy is a dog, right?
I imagine that he's like... Have you ever played Metal Gear Rising?
Yes, I have. Love that game. Great game.
Because like early in the first stage where you land on this beach, there's this cat, and no matter how savagely you try to attack it just backflips out of the way of all your attacks. I imagine Torgal's like that.
Yeah, you cannot pet the dog in Metal Gear Rising, though. I don't believe you can. That was before that meme, which now means every single game developer has to go out of their way to go and design a dog you can pet.
God.
So, where do we want to start with this Final Fantasy XVI media blitz? I mean, oh, man. He spoke a lot. He showed a lot of the game. The game has gone gold as of today. And it's 2 months ahead of time. I mean, I think he kind of answered everybody's doubts about the game and even responded to criticism in real time in his presentation, which was interesting because slices of Final Fantasy XVI have been coming out earlier this month with various media outlets. And he's like, all your complaints? No, bullshit. I have answers for all that. It's like people are like, oh, the environments are too small. He's like, nope, here's a kilometer by kilometer size slice of the world with a gigantic skybox behind it. We're good.
Yeah, which I don't even think is all that impressive. Like, and by that I mean, like, I don't think this whole push for, oh, we have to have these huge fucking giant environments in games, and they have to be big as fuck so that you can explore everything. I think that's a stupid ass trend. So, I mean, I'm glad that he answered that, but they shouldn't have been asking it in the first place.
Well, I think it was just that the earlier slice of combat was in a relatively small room, and he's like, no, this engine is not limited. We can have big fuck-off areas, and the game seemed to be running pretty well. I think so.
Yeah, like, the gameplay footage at the start of the month was, like, this one castle area at night. So, not only was it a very small area, it was very hard to see anything.
Yes. So, no, the game runs very well in the day, I think. Yes, he later has a gigantic field area and fights a coral and some other kind of tiger enemy, and it seems to be running very, very well with that.
Right. Yeah, it does seem like, because, you know, like most modern games, it does have a performance switch, which the options are 2K 60 and 4K 30, and like the 60 frames mode seems to do 60 frames.
Yeah, and it was running on a PlayStation 5 on stage.
Right, yeah.
Which I'm willing to believe they were not bullshitting us about. No, because the game has gone gold, so I think the game is actually completely finished. They're just probably going to do, like, the last minute, you know, polishing.
Right.
Maybe whatever comes up in the day one patch. But at this point, this game's done. It's ready to go. It looks pretty damn good. I'm most impressed by the icon fights, which are what the summons are called now. Because he responds to this too, where everyone had kind of just assumed that this was going to be QTE and it was all going to be canned animations or whatever. No, it's a completely different kind of slice of the battle system where you could fully move as Ifrit or Phoenix or whichever one you're playing as and go fight a monster that's many, many times your size, and it looks awesome.
Like, the game does look very impressive, and yeah, even with Ifrit being, like, you know, a slow kind of brawl thing, they do still even switch that up, and shows that one fight where you play Phoenix in a Panzer Dragoon like segment. So
yeah, rail shooter. I like a rail shooter.
Yeah,
we're way overdue for one of those. I haven't played anything like that since Kingdom Hearts 3 at this point.
The summon fights, I will say, for 16 are so fucking cool. Like, I mean, those have always been the coolest fucking thing about this game. Like, even back when I wasn't all that into it, I still thought, okay, you know, those fights are pretty fucking sweet. Like, I think anyone will tell you that much.
Yeah.
But no, like, what I was most happy with was just how the combat looks. Like, you know, the combat. I mean, I'm still sad about the lack of party members, but you know what? The combat is so fun. I almost don't give a fuck at this point. Like, it just looks so fun to play.
I do have one worry, because you can equip your summon abilities in battle. That's like most of Clive's powers, is that he's borrowing powers from a Ifrit or whoever. It does look very busy, so I'm worried there might be a slight readability issue where I won't know where to dodge. However, the game does have various easy modes, such as you can equip an ability that means you can dodge out of the way. The game will, like, pause itself, so then you can hit R1 and dodge. That's one of, like, its accessibility modes.
It gives you multiple options for that. Like, there's one that's just auto dodge and one that's we slowed the game down and tell you to hit the button to dodge.
Yeah.
And
Yoshi-P played with one hand for a while, which is shocking to do on stage.
Yeah, he just mashed square. Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't even looking at the controller.
Yeah.
I will say one thing.
Is...
Yeah, Catuse?
I mean, Yoshi-P's public persona is, I am a hardcore gamer. I want to do hard games and hard challenges, and I'm going to play my hard-ass game with one hand. That is his public persona, yes.
Well, he had put on the accessibility mode, so all he had to do was hit square and R1. Though what was I going to say? I will say one thing, is that this is an hour-long overview of a video game, and I think we were commenting on this earlier, is that how much do you have to say about a modern game anymore? Because it's like, alright, I'm going to show you the part where there's cutscenes. I'm going to show you the part where you can equip abilities, and it's like, this is what every game has. This is the part with side quests.
Well, I mean, like, you know, that doesn't necessarily tell you if that stuff is any good or not. Like, and I think the fact that they are showing us this much, you know, because going back to Forspoken, right? They barely showed us anything of that in comparison to how much they showed us for 16. Like, yeah, I mean, in comparison, like, you know, it seems very clear to me. Like, I saw this take going around on Twitter that, like, Final Fantasy XVI is showing GOTY vibes, as in showing Game of the Year vibes. And honestly, like, I have a hard time disagreeing with that. Like, because, I mean, they seem very confident in it, and it looks very good.
Yeah, no.
Like, yeah, it is actually pretty easy to suss out who the main competitors for Game of the Year are in a given year, and so far this year, Final Fantasy XVI and Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom are absolutely going to be considered competitors.
Oh my god, that's going to be a rough May, because I'm going to have to beat Tears of the Kingdom in like 6 weeks, so that I'm ready for Final Fantasy XVI, which is out on the 22nd of June. So I'm going to have to find out what the hell the meat arrows do very quickly, because I won't have that much time to experiment.
Yeah, I think I'm going to sit on Tears of the Kingdom for a while, because, you know, while it does look like a good game, it's not grabbing me as much as Breath of the Wild did so far.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm feeling, is, maybe it's just like an overall exhaustion as the older I get, but it's like, have we run out of video game ideas at a certain point? Like, I get that this is a really good one of these, but it is one of these, where I can kind of see exactly what's going on. It's like, here's the side quest, there's going to be billions of them. Here's the crafting part, there's going to be billions of that. Tears of the Kingdom, though, looks like it's doing something very different mechanically, so I think I'm fully excited about that. And I don't know, am I just depressed and weird? Or I don't. What's
No. I think I do see what you're saying, because like there is a lot of convergence, and a lot of video games do seem to be very much taking from one another in a way. So like, you know, for example, like, you know, since Uncharted dropped, we've always had video games that seem to have these long walking segments, right? And, you know, same with The Last of Us. Since then, it seems to be, we have to have a walking segment with 2 people. Like, you know, suddenly God of War went from this like platformer hack and slash game to now just being basically The Last of Us with hack and slash in it, right? And you know, you can see some of this with Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it has to have those segments that look like, you know, basically any other Sony PlayStation exclusive game that's going to come out with its, you know, with its walking segments and its immersion.
7 Remake did a lot of that because it helps mask loading, and Integrate had a lot less of that.
Right,
so,
that is true.
Yeah, that's one thing I did not see in Final Fantasy XVI, any of it, was a moment where Clive has to sidle through a very thin section of something or another. Which I bet will be in the game. I bet that's going to be there somewhere. But, you know.
That's right. But Yeah, I do see what you're saying to an extent, but I'm not sure to what extent I would apply that to 16 versus like I think that criticism applies much more to, for example, Final Fantasy 15, where it seemed like in trying to be like the rest of the industry, it had lost too much of what made it a Final Fantasy game. Where I'm just like I'm not sure to what extent that applies to 16 because to me, it feels like there's a bit more Final Fantasy DNA in it, question mark, than 15 had. So I'm
Well,
not like
like,
fully disagreeing with you. I'm just not sure to what extent I would agree.
I don't think
well,
it's
like
even.
one thing that Yoshida has talked about, in reference to like this game feeling so different from other mainline Final Fantasy games, is that the definition of the Final Fantasy series that's basically given to him by the people in charge of the series before him is that it's basically just what the people in charge want to do at that given time. There's a bit of shared lineage, but if they want to go crazy, they go crazy, and that is exactly what happened here. Yoshida got given the chance to design a title from scratch instead of the case of 14, where he was put in charge of one that he had to salvage, and like he decides, what the people in my team really want to do is make this big spectacle action game. So that's what they're doing.
I think what I'm getting at is, all right. In May we have a Zelda game. In June we have the new biggest Final Fantasy game. This should be the most infinite level of delight. It is everything I've ever asked for out of the video game industry. If in July Kingdom Hearts 4 was coming out, my head should be exploding. And yet, I don't know. I don't feel so overwhelmingly joyful. And I don't know why that is yet. This should be the greatest year in gaming ever. And I don't know what's going on with me.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it feels like you played a lot of games. A lot of them have not been that good, and you probably
Yeah.
just burnt out.
Yeah, no, I agree with that take completely. I think Final Fantasy has let us down on a number of occasions, and I think many people are struggling to get our hopes up after what happened with 13 and 15 happening right after one another. Like, I remember like many people were super getting their hopes up for 15, and it just not living up to that. For a lot of people, Kingdom Hearts 3 didn't live up to their hopes either. So
Well, they're wrong.
I think, well,
I'll fight
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
I'll fight them in the street.
yeah, but like, to me, like the only single player, I should say, the only single player game they've ever put out in recent times that's ever really lived up to expectations is 7 Remake, right? And even then, like, there's a large section of the fan base who hated it. It's not a majority, but there's a portion of people who just were never gonna like anything that they put out other than them literally just redoing the same thing with the same graphics. So, and even then, they probably complain about something. There are people who complain about Crash Insane, which was just that, or Spyro Trilogy, when it was just that. So, I mean, I would agree with the take that I think a lot of it does come from burnout of being in these situations before and just not wanting to get our hopes up again.
Yeah, I don't know if it's burnout, because I have played some really damn good games the last few years. Maybe it's just, you know what? I have to have the game in front of me. I have to be in that world. I have to play Final Fantasy XVI in order for me to fully be in love with Final Fantasy XVI, where I can look at Tears of the Kingdom and I know exactly how that game's going to play. And I think it's just been long enough for me to be nostalgic for Breath of the Wild, so I think I'm going to love that fucking game. I can guarantee you that. Especially because you can put an eye on your arrow, and the arrow will go kill innocent birds for you. It becomes a homing arrow.
I'm not sure how I feel about that
I
yet.
mean, I do admit that seeing that video did get me a lot more interested in the game. Like the just like all the various merging stuff looks like it's going to result in some really, really stupid, ridiculous shit. And like I have seen some of the weird, stupid, ridiculous shit that people do in Breath of the Wild. You know, like their fucking magic trick shots that manipulate pretty much everything in the game, so like they can kill an enemy from like several kilometers away.
Yeah, it's gonna get weird. That game's gonna get real freaking weird. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, that's that bit looks fucking fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm sure in Final Fantasy XVI, when I get to the point where I am fighting who I'm predicting the final boss is going to be Joshua Reborn, because he's Phoenix. Get it? There's no way Joshua's not coming back. He's Phoenix. It's right there.
Yeah, they're absolutely going to play into that somehow.
Yeah. So when you're fighting your little brother as the final boss, I think I'm going to start feeling some things, and whatever I'm feeling right now is going to be long past. Hopefully. Because I don't know what I'm going to do with myself if I end up not liking Final Fantasy XVI. I don't know how I could continue with whatever it is we do. Alright. I have another issue I want to bring up. So this is from an interview that Yoshida did. Yoshi-P, of course. This is regarding the term JRPG. Have any of you looked into this one?
Yeah, this thing.
Yeah. I want to quote him directly, because I have some complicated feelings about this one. But the first time we heard it, JRPG, it was like a discriminatory term, as though we were being made fun of for creating these games. And so for some developers, the term JRPG can be something that will maybe trigger bad feelings because of what it was in the past. It wasn't a compliment to a lot of developers in Japan. We understood that recently. JRPG has better connotations being used as a positive, but we still remember the time when it was used as a negative. So I think it was him more or less implicitly asking for people to stop using JRPG. I don't know. What do you all think about that?
So, an interesting thing is, after that being said, people did try to do some digging on that, try to find when the term might have first been heard by the Japanese developers community, because of course they're not tuned into the community we are. They wouldn't have known that this term's been around since like the 90s.
Right.
The first time that it seems likely that Japanese developers would have heard the term JRPG is back in 2009. There's this interview with Greg Sezchuk, founder of BioWare, and a lot of it was basically him trying to puff up the writing skills of his own studio at the expense of Japanese role-playing game makers. Which, first of all, as someone who has seen multiple BioWare games, bullshit.
Yeah. That's a really shitty thing. But go on.
Yeah. And second of all, this was in the era. This is like late 6, going through 7th generation, where Western media was extremely fucking racist. Like, dear God, one thing that other people dug up at the time was old episodes of X-Play. There's a G4 game show with Adam Sessler and stuff.
I was a big fan of X-Play at the time.
And every time they brought up Japan, they managed to say something incredibly fucking horrible. There's stuff in there like Japan wasn't a country until America nuked them twice.
Yeah, this
is an actual thing said on the show. And when people brought this up, Adam Sessler actually doubled the fuck down on this on Twitter. He started complaining that people are only mad that are dismissing their wank bait. Like, God, what the fuck is wrong with this person?
Yeah, X-Play's kind of bread and butter was kind of being the comedy video game review thing, and in 2006, comedy was in a different place than it is now, where part of their thing was let's be as offensive as possible. They also did legitimately hate JRPGs. They would refer to them as another cookie-cutter JRPG, which, to be fair, in the year 2006 or so, if you were reviewing a ton of PlayStation 2 games, there were a shit ton of games that looked very similar to each other, but they also were pretty much assholes about it. And that was their character they were playing, was assholes. And I don't think they were even playing a character at a certain point.
Yeah, and like, that was the worst of it, but like, the media landscape just in general could get really, really bad whenever Japanese games were involved. Like, there's that one infamous Phil Fish interview where he basically just says the Japanese suck at video games. And there's that one review of the original Nier where the reviewer basically just got fed up because he couldn't figure out how to follow the map.
Which, in fairness, was very unclear, but...
There are countless examples of media just not giving a fuck and putting out the stupidest thing they can say on the topic. And yeah, if you tried to pay attention to Western games media during that period, you would get the impression that the Western community considered just the word Japanese a slur. Like,
which is
it was
so
that bad.
It's so funny considering how things have changed, and people nowadays from those same kind of communities are now like, praising Japanese developers to all high heavens because it's not quote unquote woke. Although, they're probably wrong about that. But, it's just so funny to see how things have changed. But this is what I always tell people. Whenever people say, oh, Final Fantasy 15 was divisive, or Final Fantasy 7 Remake, oh, that's so toxic. No, dude, if you were around when Final Fantasy 13 released, and basically, you would see endless article after article over how JRPGs are dead and they're dying, and how so that's where Japanese developers would have got it from, because it would have been from a bunch of people saying, oh, Japanese studios have no innovation left, or they're about to, their whole industry is about to die because people didn't like 13 that much. That's how much people didn't fuck with that game, right? That's how much I should say a section of fans did not fuck with that game, right? So I totally understand why Yoshi-P would have made that comment and said, yeah, we kind of freak out when we hear that term. We kind of just like it when, people just refer to us as an RPG, because it's what it is. It's an RPG. But it does definitely explain to me also how, you look at Dark Souls, for instance, and I would say 16 and 15 are others examples of it, where people would say, oh, they play more like a Western RPG. But the studio behind it wasn't thinking in terms of, oh, we want it to seem like it's a Japanese or like a Western game. No, they just want to make an RPG. They just want to make an action RPG, and it just so happens they were inspired by Western RPGs.
Yeah.
Something that
Catuse go.
So aside from all the racism, something that I feel like is maybe not translated super well is how catastrophist a lot of Western media is, right? Like, oh my God, the entire industry was collapsing because Final Fantasy 13 was like a B-list game. And then you saw the same thing with Final Fantasy 15. Oh, Final Fantasy is racist now because Final Fantasy 15 had the Backstreet Boys as its characters or whatever. with with a lot of Western media, there's often like these crazy overreactions to things that are pretty small and don't matter that much in hindsight. And so yeah, if you the obvious Final Fantasy 13 is long after 2006, but I think it's easy to see how sort of like a super backlash to Final Fantasy 13 translates to the term JRPG becoming kind of like a dirty term in Japan. Because just the sort of, we're used to like catastrophism. It's what everyone does. It's stupid, but everyone does it.
Yep.
But I don't think it translates well.
No, I think that's fair. That's fair too. There's definitely like, a cultural component to it as well. Like that definitely comes down to it too. But yeah, when I read that, like I was seeing so many people like get almost angry about it, like, oh, why aren't they being true to what we love about JRPGs, that they don't even want to make JRPGs anymore. I'm like, if you just practice like a second of reading what they were saying and like a second of like cultural empathy, then like, you'd realize they're not saying what you're wanting them to say so that you can doom and gloom about this game. Like, it's frustrating when you hear takes like that. But
yeah,
in any case, I think it's a perfectly fair statement to make, and I feel for him that the term has been that they've considered the term to be a negative thing, because many such as myself will consider it quite a positive thing, because I happen to prefer the Japanese style of making role-playing games over the Western style of role-playing games.
And another thing I think is that the distinction that required like the creation of a term that allowed you to distinguish between one that follows game development patterns in Japan versus one that follows gameplay development patterns in America and Europe. That has mostly gone away. There are still points at the extreme, but Western games are a lot more cinematic and character-driven than they used to be. Eastern games, Japanese games, they have taken some of the more open structure from Western games. And also, in some cases, those very classic dungeon crawlers, the original RPGs, Japan honestly makes more of those than the West does these days. One of the progenitors of the genre was Wizardry. Japan's actually made more games in the Wizardry series than the United States.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to get to. Is like, all right, there is I want to look at like the entire history of RPG and like video game RPG just for a second. Like, Japan was inspired by the same things that, well, I'll just call them Western RPGs were. Like, Final Fantasy is born out of the same D&D role-playing traditions that Ultima is born out of. And, I mean, imagine you think you're just making what's part of this one global tradition of RPGs. We're part of Wizardry, we're successors to that. You can look at FromSoft. They were as inspired by Ultima Underworld and all those sorts of things to go and make their weird PlayStation 1 game that everyone... What's that one game? They made like 4 of them. That first-person game. It kind of looks like Super Highlight, but it was actually like good. I can't remember the exact name of it off the top of my head.
I can't think of any specific games that I know. I don't think it's Kingsfield. I thought Kingsfield was like more of a direct predecessor to the Souls games.
No, it was like predecessor. Yep, maybe it is Kingsfield. I think yes, it is Kingsfield. Thank you. That's the exact game. So you can look at like lots of games like this, and it's clear that there's always been a communication between East and West, where one's inspiring the other. And to suddenly be told, no, you're not part of our tradition, you're part of a different tradition. This is some smaller thing called JRPG, which even if you're saying it positively or negatively, like negatively, just fuck off. Like just straight up, like just easy enough.
Yep.
Phil Fish, screw off. Yep. Everybody in 2009 and that era who was...
Phil Fish did screw off years ago. He hasn't been hurt since he deleted his account.
Yeah, whatever. But, there was a lot of triumphalism in that era of like we had finally defeated Japan, and that xenophobia was definitely in the media, and it was definitely in the games industry, and people were guilty of it. Even I was guilty of it to a certain extent. I'll be honest. I've said lots of shitty things online. I'm sorry about them. So if you're looking at it negatively, it's bad. But if you're looking at it positively, even in that way, like, because I've always considered myself kind of a JRPG player, and until Yoshi-P had said this, I hadn't really like examined that too well. There's something exoticization about it. There's something a bit uncool about it, because it's certainly not like JRPG is the same thing as anime, where like in Japan there seems to be a conscious recognition that our animation industry is distinct, and we're proud of it, and we're happy to be distinct from the global animation tradition. Where
I mean, even then, that's like just primarily a stylistic thing. Like, you know, an American cartoon in Japan is just an American anime, because that's just the term for the medium.
Yes. Whereas JRPG, if the developers, the people who make them, they don't want to use that term, they're uncomfortable with it, I don't know what utility it ultimately has anymore, and maybe we should be retiring it.
So my understanding of JRPG has been, ironically, that it has nothing to do with, or very little to do with the actual country.
Yeah, that's another point where I want to point out where the definition is almost meaningless these days. The most influential JRPG of the past decade is Undertale, which was made in fucking Boston.
Yes.
Right.
And one of my favorite games of last year was a game called Chained Echoes, which in my review I used the term JRPG like 20 times. That is made by a German guy. Inspired heavily by a dozen Japanese games, but like calling it a JRPG is kind of a meaningless term at that point. I use the term 4 times. Okay.
I think it needs to be understood in the same sense as the term Polish dog, where I clearly did not cook this sausage in Poland, but somehow it is distinct from a hot dog.
What's a Polish dog? I actually don't know that term.
I actually don't know that. That's
they're like spicier hot dogs.
Oh, is that
interesting?
Is that a Chicago thing?
I did not eat any in Chicago, but wait, am I making this up? I swear to God, Polish dogs.
No, because it sounds familiar, and I'm remembering now. I just watched a movie called The Sting, which is from 1973, but it's set in like the 30s, and I remember seeing a sign for Polish dog. I didn't examine it too much because I'm like, oh, this is like set from 100 years ago. It's probably long since retired, but.
Oh, apparently the definition is it's a Polish dog if it has garlic. I just interpret, they taste different, but I guess they taste different because Polish dogs have garlic. Okay, but my point is that Poland has very little or nothing to do with garlic.
Yes.
Japanese RPG is not a very good term for what it's describing, but it is describing I think it is describing something different than a Western RPG, where Undertale is clearly a Japanese RPG from Boston. So these terms should be replaced, but I don't think that they have no meaning whatsoever.
Yeah, there are very distinct things. Like, there are certain features that I think of as JRPG features, and certain that I think as Western RPG features. So, for example, like the level system in Japanese RPGs, to use the term in absence of a better one, like, you could get to like level 99 in Final Fantasy VII, and you could one-hit everything, right? In a Western RPG, that's not going to happen. You can get to maybe level 20 at the max, and it's not going to make that much of a difference, because if you suck at whatever that game's combat system is, you're just going to lose to the boss no matter what. And the other thing is, like, Western RPGs are you're much more likely to not be given an actual character. You have to make your own character, and they'll give you a character creation thing, and you'll have to set their own name, and then it will be this whole thing where they'll try and insert you, and then you're the silent protagonist, because obviously they can't give you a voice. Sometimes they do, whatever. Whereas in a Japanese RPG, you're much more likely to be given a main protagonist like Cloud, like Lightning, Squall, whoever.
Yeah,
be
but
given an actual protagonist.
That's not necessarily
interacts
true
with
of either one of them.
Oh, it's not necessarily true either way. It just in my experience, it tends to be more one or the other. Like, so I think definitely like there probably could be a better name for that genre than just JRPG, but it's hard to say because it's not really clear cut.
See, and like one thing is back before like the actual solidification of the JRPG term, the two categories were generally a Western RPG was a computer RPG, while the Japanese RPG was a console RPG, because the platforms of choice tended to be like DOS, Windows, and the NES, respectively.
Yeah. A lot of games did cross over between both. Like you could play, I think you could play Ultima 7 on the Super Nintendo or something insane like that.
Right. Yeah, but like at some point we just got to admit that like the term is too dated, and there needs to be a better descriptor of it.
Yeah, because
that's what happened with the terms beforehand. It's what's happening to the terms today.
Yeah, I mean, like the Undertale example. Like, all right, there's a very specific thing that's playing up Earthbound and the Moon, the PlayStation 1 game, is the ones that's specifically inspired by. That game is so different in every single way from Final Fantasy XVI that to call them both the same genre is meaning that the genre term is probably overly broad. Which unfortunately leads me to the next question, which is like, what the hell is an RPG anymore? Because Final Fantasy XVI, if you look at it, all the things it's doing is basically the same thing that any old Assassin's Creed game is doing, and is that an RPG?
the last few Assassin's Creed games, Origins onwards, they went full on into that Western style RPG sort of gameplay.
Yeah.
So,
which means like, unfortunately, genre questions in the video game industry become increasingly muddy because the AAA game is kind of what the genre is at this point, because everything has RPG mechanics, everything has action mechanics, everything has beautifully rendered cinematic cutscenes, everything has crafting, everything's going to have some kind of multiplayer element to it. It's not like there is a genre anymore in that space, it's that there's one genre. There's the game. The game.
I don't know if I agree with that too much, because I mean, yeah, sure, if you're talking about games that you typically expect to buy on a console nowadays, then yeah, they've blended together a lot. But for example, like you pick up a PC game, like or you pick up like a mobile game or something like that.
Those are not AAA games, though. Typically.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not, but like like big multiplayer games, for example, still get a AAA budget. Like, you still get your Call of Duty or whatever, or like your FIFAs and Maddens or whatever. Like, these still get AAA budgets. They're just I see what you mean.
Those are different things, though. Yeah, but I think even Madden has RPG mechanics in it now.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure so does FIFA. But yeah, like I think I know what you're talking about, where when you're talking about games in a certain space where we seemingly used to get much more diversity in the types of games we were getting, and now they're much more homogenous because the studios go for safer bets, quote unquote. Then I do see what you're saying in the, for example, like Hogwarts Legacy. Like that game basically...
God, we don't need to fucking bring up Hogwarts Legacy.
Oh, okay. Let me think of a better example. Okay, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
There you go. Example. Yes, better example.
Yeah, better example. It's basically just, the kind of action RPG-ish game that we get all the time, but with a Star Wars skin to it. That's the thing that's distinguishing it from the other games. Like, when you bring up ones like that, then yeah, it does seem to be that we're getting much more homogeneity there. I don't know if that was even the right term in terms of the games we're getting in this specific space. But in the context of the gaming landscape more broadly overall, then I do think you still do get a good enough amount of variety that I'm not yet ready to be too freaked out about it. But I do see what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer to this, because ultimately I still find utility in the term JRPG, so I feel like I'm going to end up using it, even though I'm increasingly uncomfortable with it. And there is still utility in the term RPG, even if it's so vague, and so many things are RPGs now that it's like...
Yeah.
I don't know. Who said we need to solve it on this podcast? It's just four idiots talking.
Well, I think...
Go ahead, Techno.
No, I was just going to say that JRPG, I don't think anyone was uncomfortable with it until Yoshi-P brought that up. And now I think, yeah.
In the West, anyway.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's just
Like,
that we had I feel like I had a blind spot that he opened up, that I should have been thinking more critically of it.
I agree. Sorry, go ahead.
You can't be omniscient, but what I was going to say is I think the answer is vibes-based analysis. If the game feels like an RPG, it's an RPG. If it doesn't feel like anything, it's a single-player AAA game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, like
that is the catch-all genre, single-player AAA game, or SP3AG.
Yes.
Yeah, like
sure.
my friend brought up to me, like, you know, when I was saying, "Oh, isn't this an RPG?" And he responded, "No." I mean, and I was like, "Whoa!" But they've got levels, and they've got leveling up, and they've got, like, you know, equipment and stuff you can get. And he responds to me like, "Yeah, but I mean, if we're using that as the term for an RPG, then anything's an RPG." And I'm not sure to what extent I'd agree with that. Like, but I do like the idea of the vibes test being a good test, because, you know, you could, if we're going by the definition of, oh, it has to have a level up system and it has to have equipment and a currency you can buy and whatever, then Ratchet and Clank's an RPG. But I don't think anyone would call Ratchet and Clank an RPG. It's a platformer, and that's what most people would call it. It just doesn't fit the vibe of quote unquote RPG.
And you know what? Mario doesn't have levels. It's the one game. It's held off. There's no RPG elements in any Mario game yet. Except for the Mario RPG. Except for the fucking Mario RPG games, yes. That I forgot.
Well, there aren't any Mario RPGs anymore, considering what Paper Mario's turned into when the makers of Mario and Luigi went bust, but yes.
Well, I just, like, Ratchet and Clank was super, like, revolutionary at the time when it came out, that it was introducing RPG and third-person shooter mechanics into a platformer game. But you look at games these days, and that seems like the least novel thing you could ever do, because so many incorporate those sorts of elements. Like, you know, Assassin's Creed has plenty of RPG mechanics in it. Like, you know, Jedi Fallen Order, filled with RPG mechanics. You know, so it's just not a novel thing anymore. And I think loads of people, like loads of studios, I should say, have incorporated those sorts of mechanics in, because, you know, people are just playing games for longer now. As in, games last longer than back when you'd have an arcade game where it literally just be, you know, you go to level 1 and then you fight the boss in the next level, and then you do whatever, like, and there wasn't much character growth or progression, and now that's become much more of an expectation.
Yeah, and now, of course, your game must be heavily monetizational. You must find a way to turn your game into a low-key casino and suck as much.
Oh, well, that's
as
one thing that hasn't changed from the arcade days.
Yeah. Actually, we are right back to where we started from, aren't we?
Well, I will say that I've been pleasantly surprised with how much people have pushed back on that, to the extent I'm not seeing it as much. At least I'm not seeing it as much in single-player games.
Yeah.
Part of that is that like European governments and stuff started cracking down on loot boxes.
Yeah, I think a mix of that and the absolute disaster that was Star Wars Battlefront 2. They had an absolute winner on their hands until they just ruined it with that. So, yeah, I think it's a mixture of both things.
Okay. Do you think we should start wrapping up then?
And is there anything else anyone needs to talk about?
I feel like we've wound up doing like an overview of the entire games industry while we were supposed to be talking about Final Fantasy XVI.
Well, I think our summary for Final Fantasy 16 is it looks good. We're excited about it. We're not as blown away as maybe we would have been for previous games, but it appears to be that part of that is due to fatigue.
Yeah, we're all just cynical old bastards. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes, yeah. I sound a bit down sometimes, but internally I'm just kind of like, fuck yes, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Because like it is. It is like it is not what I would have expected from a mainline Final Fantasy game, but it is still a thing that I want.
Yeah.
That is
like
exactly my take on it. Like
Yeah.
if you'd asked me, if you'd given me an infinite budget and said design the next mainline Final Fantasy, would I have made this? Fuck no. I wouldn't have made that. I would have gone sci-fi. I would have put a female protagonist in. I would have done party mechanics. I would have basically done the Gambit system all over again with the 7 remake combat system. I wouldn't have done any of this shit. But
yeah,
am I still doing this?
And as some of you cheaters interviews have pointed out, you wouldn't be wrong. That would still be Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. You know, I would have done that shit instead. But, you know, they went with this. They went with this direction. And it seems like we're still getting a really good fucking game. Right? And as to how much it will affect the future of the series from this point on, I think it will depend a lot on how well this game sells and how well this game does. And I do expect it to critically do extremely well. As for how well it sells, remains up in the air. I think it's going to sell well.
It's going to sell great.
It's going to sell great. It's just, is it going to do Final Fantasy VII remake numbers, or is it going to do like Dark Souls numbers or GTA numbers or something like that?
It's not. No one's going to do GTA 5 numbers.
No, okay. No one's going to do GTA numbers.
I think GTA 5 has sold like 180 million copies or something like that. Last I checked.
Okay.
Like 7 remake was like it sold immensely well. Like that is very much a astounding success by Square Enix standards, and would have been possibly one of their greatest successes ever if the Marvel's Avengers hadn't come out in the same financial year and caused a loss about equal to the amount of money they made off 7 remake.
Yeah.
God.
All right.
But, yeah, like it's probably going to sell amazingly, and its main limiting factor probably isn't the game itself, but the fact that it's a PS5 exclusive, which that situation has started to wear off. As I know, there's a lot of people who aren't aware of the fact that situation has started to improve.
Yeah, but Resident Evil 4 sold what, like 3 million copies? But that's a multi-console. Yeah. Already 3 million copies in like a week.
In the words of the great poet of the 2000s, Marshall Mathers, they sell like 4 million when they put out a bad album, or in this case, a bad game. So they're gonna sell well. It's just how well on top of their usual good performance they're gonna do.
Yep. All right, so I figure we'll end there. This has been the Final Fantasy Wiki Podcast, brought to you by Potions. Who's going to be our sponsor next month? I don't know. Will it be Super Potions? X Potions? Elixirs? You know where to contact...
Final Fantasy 15 Red Bulls, that's what it's going to be.
Yes. Final Fantasy 13 Cup of Noodles. With lightning on it. So, if you want to be sponsored by the Final Fantasy Wiki Podcast, we're non-profit, so we're not going to do that. I'm BlueHighwind. I've been hosting this thing.
You can talk to like fandom because they'll take money for anything, but you can't talk to us directly.
No, and fandom is not technically in control of this. But the
They're
Final
not in
Fantasy
control of the podcast,
yeah. But the Final Fantasy Wiki is controlled by fandom. That's at finalfantasy.fandom.com. And the podcast music is La Montana de los Jovenes Caballeros. I think I said that backwards a little bit, but that's fine. That's by XPRTNovice off the OC Remix album of Final Fantasy VI. It's the Final Fantasy VI Mount Koltz music. Balance and Ruin is the album title. And that's everything. If you continue to listen, your podcatcher will start up a new show, which means that this show is over. So, I mean, even if you want to hang around, you cannot. It's over. It's ending. The file is over.